Hey there. Wanted to show or share with you a few thoughts I had about a scripture in Second Timothy chapter 2, verses 20 and 21. In a large house, there are articles not only of gold and silver, but also of wood and clay. Some are for special purposes and some for common use. Those who cleanse themselves from the latter will be instruments for special purposes, made holy, useful to the master, and prepared to do any good work. Um, there's very interesting scripture. I know that we all feel like we want to be of the gold and the silver nature and to be used by God in His work. That's what I strive to do. I'm trying to help others, and I'd like to share an experience I had the last couple weeks in that light. So are we being used by God for a special purpose, or they're common? Are we being uncommon or common? And what does it mean to be uncommon? Um, yeah, after the last couple of weeks, I've had some experiences with rock climbing that fear kind of overcame me, and I was consumed by that fear of that fear. In rock climbing, it's all about controlling that fear and focusing on what you're doing right in front of you. And so for the last couple of weeks, I felt like there were some things I was supposed to do. I was supposed to drop by the homeless shelter and talk to some of the people there, and I had done other things instead. And so a couple of weeks ago, I decided, fear was not going to be a factor. I was going to do whatever I felt directed to do. And so I ended up driving the 20 minutes way to the shelter. And in the back of the building that they own, there's a place where most of the people around lunchtime, they get their lunch served to them, and they sit on some picnic tables underneath a canvas of sorts to shade them from the sun. In the summer, that's very helpful. This time of year, it's feels great. Anyway, so I went back there, and there was just a few people, which was unusual. And I walked up to this young man, happened to be a black young man that was sitting at one of the benches, cleaning his e-cigarette. He had it in pieces and he was cleaning it. And, a lot of us think, well, how awkward that was. As I was walking up to him, he kind of smiled. He was very friendly and open. I asked him if I could sit with him and talked for a minute. And it was very easy. It didn't have to be uncomfortable. I made it easy. I just told him, hey, I was a volunteer at the shelter and I had some time. They didn't have any use for me for doing other things. So I wonder if I could talk to him for a minute. Most people are, of course, have nothing else to do anyway. So, but before I can continue with that story, I need to give you some background of some of the things that I had done the last few years. Um, I had a desire to become a pilot, to be a licensed pilot myself. And so, um, yeah, I spent probably 6 to 8 months going through the training. At least every Saturday I would show up to the airport and I would meet my instructor, rent the plane, and he would take me up for an hour and a half. We would do some cross country training and other things. And so I spent quite a bit of time and money doing that. And when the economy kind of changed and rates went crazy, because that's the business I'm in, doing mortgage loans, I decided to put that kind of on hold. That this was just kind of an expensive hobby. I couldn't afford to spend, it was thousands of dollars a month on a hobby at this point. So I put it on hold. So going back to this story, as I was sitting and talking to this young man about my experience, and I was asking about his background, asking where he was from, he said he was from West Africa, and which was surprising to me because his English was so good, there was no accent. Couldn't tell that he wasn't a native. He said he still had family there, and he came to Southern Utah to study, to go to the university, but he didn't have enough money, I assume, to pay for schooling and rent. And so he decided to stay at the homeless shelter. As I was talking to him, I shared a little bit about my experience and having a son at home, and that my son was training also for a trade, and that he was, working towards that end in the construction field. Um, and during that time, he kind of opened up and he said, it was his dream to become a pilot, and that he wanted to fly for FedEx, and he wanted to continue his training, but couldn't find an instructor or really didn't have a path of what to do. Um, I said, well, that's very interesting because I have some background that way. I also had been training to get my pilot's license. I had something like 40 hours of training. I had had my solo endorsement, and I'd be glad to to hook him up with some of the people that I knew. And he was so excited. He's like, "Oh, that would be so great. That would be a godsend. That would get me back on track." Those are almost his exact words. And so when I left and got home, I texted my instructor. I asked him if he had space for another student. I asked him, and he didn't. He was booked through September of next year, but he sent me two additional people. I texted this information to this young man. We'll call his name Sam. But I, and he was so grateful. He took that information, and I got to thinking, what are the chances of Sam being there at that exact time, needing some information that I could give him, some knowledge, needing some direction, maybe some encouragement. What are the chances? What's the likelihood? Maybe Sam's parents have been praying for their son who was far away to have someone to help him achieving or starting a track towards his goals. Maybe Sam himself was praying for help. Um, did this make a difference to him? To me, it showed me that the Lord cares about all of his sons and daughters more than anything. He knows our wants and our needs, and he sets things up to help. So, I did follow up. It's been a week or so since I've talked to him. I followed up today. He's already set up his initial flight with that instructor. And I went to visit him today. I said, "Hey, I've got some other training materials that I'd be glad to give you. It would be better to be used if I decide to pick up my training again. I'll just rebuy these things." And in the text back, he was said, "Oh, that would be great. That would be wonderful, whatever you can provide." And so I set it up this morning as I was walking towards him. You should have seen his face. He was so excited with the big smile he had on his face and the things I was willing to share with him. So I spent a minute with him. I showed him all the books and the training materials I had, gave him the backpack, gave him a few other things, some knee boards and things like that. He was so excited. He was so grateful. He was so happy. The smallest thing, does it make a difference to him in his life? Regardless of the outcome, on the way home, I was praying and thanking the Lord. I told him, "Thank you so much for this opportunity to be involved with Sam's life, regardless of what he does." And it sounds like he's going to follow up. Thank you so much for the opportunity I had to meet him, and I'll continue to reach out to see what he needs. What a great blessing it is for us to be involved in God's work and to help him help the Lord in all that he's trying to help other people with. Thanks.